So here we are. I think we are live. Yes, we are. I get a confirmation from the platform. Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's webinar. I hope the broadcasting works perfectly for all of you and that you can all clearly hear and see us. My name is Tobias Jaus. I'm a business developer and project manager for Epic Conjoint, and I have the great pleasure to be your host today. I'm constantly giving my best to hide it, but my accent will reveal that I'm joining you today from Germany. I have seen that the sign-up list that we have is quite international as well. So it's fantastic to have an international audience today. Welcome again, everybody. So this session today will focus on a situation that many of you might have encountered already. Like how many times have you launched a new product or you are very close to the launch, and then you think some more information about my target group, about certain specifics of my offering, or about the ideal price would be really helpful. So keep this scenario in mind because during the next 60 minutes, we will figure out how conjoint analysis can de-risk new product introductions and make you a product launch hero, which is also the title of today's webinar. So we will demonstrate that Conjoint is an incredibly versatile and powerful tool and how it can help you in a really easy and efficient way to base product decisions on really actionable insights. The focus and highlight of the webinar will be a live demo of a conjoint analysis that will clearly showcase the benefits. For example, also a powerful market simulator, and it will also help for your use case. Let's introduce our speakers. You can see them on the next slide and on the left side of the screen. So today's presenters are Epic Conjoint's own Matt Johnson and Shiva Iyer, both decorated veterans with decades of experience in product management, product strategy, and pricing. Matt is joining us from Dublin, Ireland today, where Epic Conjoint is headquartered. Matt is the founder and CEO of Epic Conjoint and former head of pricing of Telefonica Ireland and Ooredoo Group. So he has an extensive background in telco and pricing. And Shiva is joining us from Carmel, Indiana today, and he's Epic Conjoint's North America Director for Business Development and Research Projects. Shiva has a strong background in B2B product management as former Director of Strategy and Product Development at Carrier. So looking at the speaker panel, I'm sure you will find much value in today's webinar. But before we begin, I have a few housekeeping notes. So first of all, the game plan is as follows. Matt and Shiva's presentation will take about 40 to 45 minutes. During the presentation, I'd love to encourage you to submit questions and comments via the chat and question window on the right-hand side. We will have plenty of time after the presentation to answer your questions in detail during a Q&A session. And you will see as soon as the first questions are coming in, you also have the option to vote questions up to give them more visibility. So yeah, during the webinar, just get familiar with the chat and the question window on the right-hand side. Today's webinar will also be recorded, and the recording along with the presentation deck will be sent to you after the webinar. During the webinar, I will share an offer with you in the chat window on the right that qualifies you for a 25% discount on your first project with us. So if you like what Matt and Shiva will present today, and you like to do a pilot with us, this might be really valuable to you. So you will find that in the chat window as well. Last but not least, we are really interested in your opinion as well. So I will start a live poll that you can also access on the right-hand side in the chat window in a minute. And the question will be, what do you see as the key opportunities to improve your company's product launch process? So you will have time to answer this poll during the next 40 minutes, and we will show the result at the end of the webinar shortly before the Q&A session. So that's from my side. Without further ado, I'd like to hand over to Matt to kick off the presentation.
Great, thank you, Toby. Thanks everybody for joining this webinar on conjoint analysis. The agenda today is as follows. We will go over I'm just conscious that many of you may not have heard of conjoint analysis or may not have used it. So we kind of set the scene with some use cases, real use cases. And we go into the role of how important conjoint analysis is in generating product insights. We will then go deeper into conjoint analysis and examine the current constraints with it, and then how we've addressed it at Conjoint Analysis, how we've created this automated platform that requires a mindset shift in how conjoint can be used. And in doing so, we'll talk to our very agile 3-step process in how you design, distribute, and analyze the results of conjoint survey. And we will then jump into a case study where we will look at more impactful product insights that can be generated with conjoint insights. We will then jump actually onto the platform itself, and we will look at the results dashboard of a conjoint study we conducted in the UK on smartphones, premium smartphones. So we will then finish up after that with some best practices. Shiva will talk to those, and then we'll hand it over to your good selves then for questions. Okay, without further ado, let's get into the nitty-gritty. We thought these 2 quotes were really pertinent in the context of today's webinar. The first one is from Peter Drucker. He's kind of a guru of an educator in business marketing, in the business marketing world. So Peter says, the aim of marketing is to know and understand the customer so well the product or service fits them and it sells itself. Philip Kotler, another marketing whiz, said, authentic marketing is not the art of selling what you make, but knowing what to make. It is the art of identifying and understanding customer needs and creating solutions that deliver satisfaction to the customers, profits to the producers, and benefits for the stakeholders. While these are all very, very pertinent, there is one glaring absence of a word that we tend to use quite often. That's value, and specifically the value customers place on products and services. And indeed the features of those products and services. And if these gurus, marketing gurus, aren't including value in their assessment of the challenges facing marketers, product managers, pricing managers, and whatnot, it's no wonder then that a lot of businesses make mistakes in this area as well. What we're finding is a lot of businesses think price, whereas customers think value. And there's another very apt quote I heard recently that said, value is created in the customer's mind, while it's not created on the product, on the factory floor. So what we're finding is that a lot of companies seem to be approaching their value-based initiatives, from the wrong angles, I guess. And looking at the bottom of this slide, you'll see cost base, and this is where some clients actually base their value, the customers, or the price they charge for the products based on the costs of those in generating those products. When in actual fact, customers couldn't give a damn about what it cost to make that product. Similarly, other clients we find, or other brands, use competitor benchmarking to price and assess the value of customers. When in actual fact, who's to know that the competitors haven't assumed a cost-based pricing policy as well? So in that case, it'll be the blind leading the blind. In terms of best practice, it's the brands that we see that have adopted value-based pricing. So they're putting that customer-centric, data-driven decision. They start with understanding and determining what customers actually value most, and then they apply their price to that. And that's where we're seeing the most success when clients launch products. IKEA are the masters of this. When they go into new markets or they launch new products, they actually go out and establish what the value customers place on the particular, say, sofa, and then they go back to their product engineers and say, develop a sofa for this cost. So this is really best practice value determining value customers place on product features. Now, while there is a challenge, there is a weapon at our disposal that can really help us in determining the value and ultimately willingness to pay customers can place on product features, and it's called Conjoint Analysis. And it is recognized as the Rolls-Royce of pricing methodology, research methodologies, when determining the optimal product features and prices for products. So it's used by the world's biggest brands. It's regardless of market, regardless of sector. It can be applied at B2C, B2B. Across, and the other benefit of conjoint analysis, it can't be gamed. The nature, it's based on trade-off analysis. So when you think about it as humans, we don't like to make decisions, particularly purchase decisions, without some kind of a compare and contrast or a benchmarking. And that's the foundation of conjoint analysis. It's based on trade-off, where you present, as you can see here in the case of these e-cars, e-SUVs, you present the products and ask the customer to make a trade-off decision. So that is the nature, and that's why it can't be gamed. Some good examples of where it's been used really successful. If The Economist magazine, when it launched its web edition, it priced it at roughly half the price of the print and web subscription. And what happened was sales totally skewed towards the lower price point. And when they went out to address this using conjoint analysis, they realized actually by inserting a third product, in the middle at the same price as the print and web subscription, and what you see here is the print subscription at $125. It totally rebalanced the sales towards the higher price point. So another great example is Allstate, the insurance company. I mean, they applied a one-size-fits-all pricing policy or a strategy for all customers, on the assumption that all customers were price sensitive. But in actual fact, when they went out and studied the market, their customer base and the market, they realized actually not all customers are price sensitive. In fact, they were able to then develop a good, better, best portfolio of products, and which then meant that they could skew some more premium type customer, less price sensitive customers towards the higher price products, and in this case the gold and platinum. So hugely successful there. But that said, even big brands, recognizable brands, can get this disastrously wrong by not using conjoint analysis. And this is a classic case of when Audi launched the Q7 back in 2006. They clearly didn't go out to the market and assess what value customers and willingness to pay customers attributed to the product itself and the features of the car or the SUV. And when the analysis was done in hindsight, they realized actually the guts of €250 million, €250 million was left on the table as a result of not going out and doing the groundwork with the target customer base. I'm going to hand over to Shiva now.
Thank you, Matt. Good morning and good afternoon, everyone. So Matt just spoke to you about how conjoint analysis is used by market leaders to drive growth. What you see here is a list of use cases that are relevant to NPI or to developing new products that are driven by the ability to understand segmented customer preferences, willingness to pay, and the ability to effectively simulate market scenarios. Conjoint analysis really helps you to do all these, and by doing this helps you establish your product market fit with a high degree of confidence and helps you create more robust business cases that are market backed and based on data to the extent of being statistically significant. So think about going through your product development governance process, and when you're asked by by finance, how valid are your assumptions in terms of your customer willingness to pay? And if you're able to say these are statistically significant to a 95% accuracy, I mean that would be something that is really beneficial to the entire team and gives you a really high degree of confidence in terms of going forward with your launch. I have, for example, often seen in these meetings or in general the question of how much will customers pay for a new feature that that the company or the business wants to introduce. That's a question that's often not answered very well in many companies, and that essentially boils down to lacking the effective tool set to answer the question. Conjoint analysis can provide a very effective market-backed answer to this question that makes the development and launch process much more data-based and likely to meet the goals of the project. In the next slide, I'll talk about the customer insights group and how they, just like conjoint analysis provides many benefits for the product people, it can also be a great tool to enable customer insights folks to drive targeted action based on precise market data. It can help the customer insights group develop really laser precise strategies based on a very segmented understanding of market preferences, and thereby help them play a key role in strategic decisions. One example of this is an electric shaver company that did an analysis of the European market, and what they found was that while there was a certain bias against manufacturing in a lower cost country, through a conjoint analysis of the claims that could be made, they were able to figure out that if, as long as they projected that they could say that it was engineered in Europe, they could go ahead and make a clear decision on a $15 million investment to manufacture it in China, but still be able to claim that it was designed in a country where people would be more inclined to buy the product. So there's a lot of scenarios where you can use conjoint analysis very effectively and drive success in your product. In the next slide, what we see is, I spoke about how you can do market simulation. So this is an example of market simulation that you can do. What this shows is the pricing has been optimized in relation to concept 5 to basically maximize revenue for concept 5. And with the right setup, you can also understand what the profitability of having optimal pricing is. It may not be the point of optimal profitability, but it depends on the goals that the businesses have in the short and medium term, and long term, as to how you want to configure like your pricing and your concept setup. But conjoint analysis can help you simulate the different scenarios and help you make a decision with a lot more confidence. Uh, that being said, now Matt will summarize the different market research methods and where Conjoint stands in that maturity path.
Yeah, we like to kind of summarize in the context of degrees of confidence, and bearing in mind there is a common belief that new product failures can run as high as 80-90%. But what conjoint analysis does, it allows you to inject much more predictability and success into those product launches by de-risking them, by going out and asking the customers. So moving from left to right on this diagram, we and I've been guilty of this in the past, is making, product and pricing decisions based on anecdotal evidence. In some case, as you move further to the right, you start to inject more data into those commercial decisions. Starting with your customer database and doing analysis, then maybe doing some qual type surveys or other quantitative surveys. But to cap it all off, to start use conjoint analysis even very early in the product development process to understand where customers are placing their value, what features of the product or service that they're placing their value on, and then testing all the way through that go-to-market process. It's invaluable. It's almost like an insurance policy, and then ultimately, as you get closer to launch, then you would use the conjoint to identify the optimal price points to go to market. And we see this over and over again. And big brands, not only big brands, a lot of brands are starting to adopt this just to de-risk their product launches. So, that said, there are conjoint analysis in its traditional form. You would typically rely on it, and anyone who's conducted a conjoint before or been part of a conjoint project with an agency, it can be a pretty painful exercise. It can be very lengthy. The perception is it's complex, it's long, it's tedious, and very expensive. But with advances in technology, and particularly cloud and API integration, automation then has allowed us to inject much more speed, agility, and cost effectiveness into the process. So a lot of people are, as I said, the perception is it's a horrible exercise to do. It can take weeks, if not months. And that's why it's not being adopted as wholeheartedly as it should be and as frequently as should be. But a mindset change is starting to happen, and that's why we're seeing being adopted. As I said, the typical constraints are time. The agility, very often it takes such a long time that you really can't make changes on the fly as you get closer to the launch of the survey. It can be a very expensive process. I don't think I ever paid less than, when I was head of pricing, less than $50,000 for a conjoint study. And it's complex. It can take up a significant amount of time in designing the survey. But unnecessarily so. What we're at Epic Conjoint wanted was to kind of disrupt that whole process by injecting automation into it, so that brands could, when the business need arises, whether it's a new product launch or changing prices, could use conjoint analysis to de-risk those decisions and take the guesswork out of many very important critical decisions. And that's what we've done. We've attempted, our mission is to demystify and democratize conjoint analysis so that brands of all sizes, companies of all sizes, regardless of their sector they operate in, whether B2B or B2C, can use conjoint analysis to de-risk product launches. And now we're getting a reputation for being the home of rapid conjoint, where we typically can conduct conjoint studies anywhere in the world, in most sectors, across most sectors, in less than 3 days. When you contrast that to the traditional methods, it could take weeks, if not months. So we've really kind of disrupted that whole process to the benefit of companies big and small. And what does it take? What have we done? Well, we've kept it really simple. The two most important questions when you're conducting conjoint surveys are who are you targeting and what are you targeting them with? And so who is your target audience? And what products are you targeting them to test? And if the more precision you can get on those, answering those two questions, the better the integrity of the results that'll be generated from the conjoint study. In terms of the types of information, the products we tested, again, it's what are you testing? These products should be relevant. I mean, with conjoint analysis, we try to replicate a real purchase decision as closely as possible. So the products should be substitutes. I mean, if that's the competitive landscape, they're the products for that particular customer segment, and that's critical from the get-go. Defining the product features, they need to be very clear and concise. They need to be explained and described if necessary. If there's new features, they should be explained well and concisely to respondents. Their feature levels within the conjoint, you'll see here, for example, sugar content. In this example, the various levels of sugar content. You can have what the existing sugar levels in the market, but also in the context of idea generation or brainstorming, you can inject new sugar content levels into this and test those as well. And in terms of the price ranges, it's you would select what's in the marketplace, and again you could put in prices above and below what that price range is to, and they can be simulated as well when the results come back. As I mentioned earlier, we have a really agile 3-step process, very clear, very simple. The survey design process is intuitive. We test the products that are in the market and maybe the new products that you want to test. We can then, once that survey is designed, within a couple of clicks, we can distribute those surveys to the target audience, and we work with third-party panel providers. In some instances, some clients prefer to distribute the surveys to their existing customer base, or we can do a combination of both. And then once the survey closes, once we achieve the target number of responses, say, for example, 300 completed surveys, within a couple of hours, then the results are available for analysis. And that's where, in the next section, I'll show you how we, kind of deep dive into the results and generate those really beneficial product insights. All along the way, you can rely on the support of our experts, pricing survey experts on demand. And this is just an example of the clients we work with, and we work with these clients all over the world in many markets. You see some very recognizable brands here across multiple sectors. So we work with management consulting firms. You see McKinsey there, A.T. Kearney, Mercedes-Benz Consulting, but we also work with some business schools. But for the most part, it's the big brands that are concerned. So for example, Vodafone have really embraced this rapid conjoint solution. We've in 2 years alone, we've probably conducted about 50 conjoint studies with Vodafone Group all around Europe. Contrast that to, they were probably in the more traditional method, maybe 3 or 4 a year. So they have really kind of embedded and changed the mindset when in the context of conjoint analysis. So, Shiva, please.
Yeah. So thank you, Matt. Some of the key product launch issues that you normally see are outlined here. So like many development projects of significance take about 1 to 2 years to go from start to finish. Today this is like a pretty long time where you can have changes in technology or the competitive landscape. Not understanding if or how customer perceptions have evolved during this period will leave the product team at a significant disadvantage, in terms of making sure that they react to changes in the market. And if you can do an agile conjoint analysis, using the methodology that Matt spoke about, earlier, at timely points during the project, it'll provide, reassurance to the entire team that the significant, project is on track to meet market expectations. I'm sure many of you have seen, products go all the way to launch on the back of like sporadic anecdotal VOC that management is often forced to make some judgment calls on which, they're not super comfortable with. I have personally seen cases where, projects took, 2 to 3 years to, develop, involved a change, in business model where the team really didn't have the tools to test or, didn't test in the market in a really robust way. And you can imagine, right, the amount of money that was wasted when that, product was launched and failed. And this is something that many of us who've been involved with, product development have seen and experienced, and it's not a fun thing to go through. But conjoint analysis can help with that, especially rapid agile like analysis, where you take frequent pulses of customer feature prioritization and what how that pertains to your particular situation or market segment. And the last one, out here, most senior executives are often frustrated when they hear about new features being developed, but no one can tell them, reliably what the customer is, willing to pay for those. And conjoint is a great way to answer that question. On the next slide, I'll kind of relate this to the development process itself, right? So, like what you see here is one of many versions of a staged development process that's followed by many organizations to ensure that their development projects are on the right track. Your organization is probably going to have its own version, but no matter what the version is, right, each stage of this process raises questions about the market, customers, and product features that can often not be satisfactorily answered without the rigor that is provided by conjoint analysis, with the high degree of confidence that it provides. Epic's agile process has now made it possible for us to deploy these pinpoint market studies to answer these questions in a rapid, accurate and efficient manner to keep the product development process headed in the right direction and avoid many of the pitfalls that I discussed in the previous slide. Matt will now take you to the most exciting part of this webinar, like the demo, and show you how the analysis works, and hopefully it'll stimulate some ideas in your mind as to how you can use it.
Okay, thanks, Shiva. Okay, folks, what I'm going to do is jump into the results dashboard, as I mentioned earlier, of this premium smartphone survey we conducted in the UK. And the first chart we see here, if you can draw your attention to the x-axis, these are the features, or the feature levels that we tested in this. We see 4 phone brands. Here we see the OnePlus 6, the Huawei P30 Pro, Samsung S10, the iPhone XS. And then moving across to the right, you'll see the various display sizes, screen sizes. You'll see various megapixels, camera megapixels, battery life there in the yellow, memory sizes, whether it's not network locked, unlocked, whether it's for full water protection or not, and price. And what the numbers you see on this chart, these are actually the preference scores that, based on the results or the selections that these respondents made, these target customers, target respondents made, this is what we can capture is their preferences using a very sophisticated algorithm. So in this context, we see that the highest preference score goes to the iPhone XS, followed by the Samsung S10, and so on. So not only can we compare the relativity in terms of preferences for each of the phones, we can compare it across all of the other features that we tested as well. The flatter the line here, so an example of display screen size, the more indifference the respondents are expressing towards that particular attribute. You'll see a slight kick up there for the 40 megapixel camera. Similarly then for the memory, and even price. It's not massively, hasn't got a hugely steep curve, to a demand curve. So, but what we can now do is using the filter feature, so we can ask segmentation type questions in the survey as well, and taking those answers, we can then start to splice and dice the results. So for example, we can take this age cohort and females and apply those filters to see, are there any significant differences in these? And we can kind of see that there's an element of a little bit more price sensitivity with females in this context, more of a nod towards higher camera megapixels and so on. But where we can really see a difference is if we knock these off and we go down to the question, what is your current brand of smartphone? This is where you'll see significance, and this is where you see the fanaticism coming through. You'll see a very different shaped mobile phone curve here. So a huge jump in the preference for the iPhone amongst the Apple customers, then followed by Samsung and so on. If we look at, and you see all the other features are relatively flat. This is very much a brand driven decision here amongst the Apple customers. If we change that and we look at Samsung, we'll see similarly, Samsung is just as fanatical about their phones, their brands. Big drop to Huawei. Even Huawei gets a shout above iPhone in this context. A little bit steeper price curve, so these customers are a little bit more price sensitive. If we look at Huawei customers, this is actually was fascinating. Huawei customers actually gave the highest preference score to a Samsung. Now, notwithstanding, in the media, Huawei as a brand has gotten a lot of negative PR, so we think that's what's coming through here. Whereas, it's nearly twice as preferred as the, or 50% more preferred as the actual Huawei phone itself. This would scream alarm bells for Huawei if Huawei had conducted this survey, because what would indicate is there's a likelihood that when these Huawei customers go to change their phones, they're actually not going to buy another Huawei. They're going to buy a Samsung. But also worth noting is Huawei customers, the Huawei phones are very, very high spec type phones. These are the ones with the 40 megapixel camera. So these customers are expressing more preference for the functionality benefits of the phone. So you'll see the camera megapixel just as high nearly as the phone itself. Similarly with the memory, and also the steeper price curve. Now, what we can do from here is also kind of come up a level and look at what I'll do is I'll just knock off the filters, and we will come up a level and look at just the overall feature or attribute importance. And we can see that in the context of the decision making, we can see about 44.4% of the decision making importance is going towards the phone itself, followed by price, followed by memory, followed by camera megapixel, and so on. So this then can start to influence what your messaging is when you do go to market, what kind of messaging you need to put around this phone when marketing it. On the left-hand side, you'll see the ideal product. This is a good starting point, particularly in the context of a business case model. Give them their wish list and let's see what falls out at the bottom line. And we also then capture the price elasticity of this phone here. And in this context, you see these are pretty price sensitive because so they will react to price promotions and whatnot. So let me just clear all there again. Okay, now what we can do from here is bring this into a business context, and we can go to our simulator. And in the simulator, we can essentially map the marketplace, this virtual marketplace with these four phones. And you can see the purple bars here are the volume shares. So we're using the preference scores that the respondents assigned to the options that they were presented with. We're using those as a proxy then for volume share, and we can see in this context, the iPhones command just about 17% of this market, followed by Huawei at nearly 24.5%, followed by Samsung, and so on. And none of these actually is an option on a choice card as well, at nearly 25%. Now, how this information can be used. So say, for example, I was the product director for the OnePlus 6. I could take the learnings of this conjoint and see, well, how do I change my fortunes then for my next phone? How do I get back in the market, back in the game? Well, I know that the highest preference score went to a 6.5-inch screen. So look at the purple bar above here. We've gone from 11.81% to 12.29%. So we've claimed back about 0.5% market share. If I can make that phone a 40 megapixel camera, we've added about another 2.5% to that. If we could match Huawei's battery length, added another 0.5%. Now remember, this was the third most important feature in the decision making. This has given it a significant bump up, and we have a new equipment manufacturer, and we can do this phone for $599. What will this do? All of a sudden, you see we're back in the game. We have a competitive product. So that's how brands, when the results come in, our clients will get access to this simulator, will get access to the results dashboard, and what they do is love rolling up the sleeves and digging in to these into the simulator and starting to play around with the results. And again, you can apply the filters to all of these analysis. All the simulations then can be bookmarked. Give them a name, and then they will appear down here in the drop-down list, and then they can all be exported to either PDF, XLS, or PowerPoint. at a later point. So just going back to the standard again, we take this then we can take this to the next level and actually then focus on price optimization. So say, for example, I'm the product director for the iPhone XS. So I want to see what is, based on the preference scores that the target audience have assigned to this particular phone, we can see what is the optimal price point that's going to generate the maximum revenue. And you see the green curve is the revenue curve. So we're taking the learnings from the preference scores and the price sensitivity, and we can map then the revenue curve. And we can see that the optimal price that will generate the most revenue is actually $829. Notwithstanding Apple's premium pricing strategy, they're charging $999. So what this would indicate, actually, they could generate even more revenue by charging a lower price point in this case. But then also what we can do is say, well, what if this phone, they understand the willingness to pay for each of the features? What if I went from a 12 megapixel to a 40 megapixel camera? Now we can see we can nearly charge £50 more from that by going from 12 megapixels to 40 megapixels. So you can really start to get an understanding of the levers where the target customers, target respondents are placing on the individual feature levels. And this is really important when ultimately deciding on what product should be launched. We also just want to show you, bring your attention to, you can also create a business casing model around this, where you can set the costs then for each of the attribute levels you see in that field there. And then we can map the revenue, the profit curve on the charts as well. And we can see what the optimal price is for when we want to look through a profit lens. Finally, just to point out, we capture all the preference scores at an individual level. So in the case, if we can map the unique survey code back to an email address or a phone number, depending on how we survey, you can start to understand how price sensitive is this particular customer, and where do they place their preferences? What really floats their boat? And this, in the context of micro segmentation or one-to-one marketing, is really strong when you consider subscription renewals, contract renewals. This is what clients use this field for. And finally, we allow you then to splice and dice the results at another level, where you can pivot table. If you're used to pivot tabling, you can create your create your pivot tables just to get a deeper feel for where the results are coming from. So that's the results dashboard. I know it's a whirlwind tour, and at any point after this, please feel free to drop us a line, and we'd be delighted to give you much more in-depth demonstration of the results dashboard. And also to point out, this particular product, obviously very spec oriented, functional oriented. You can bring in marketing messages in here, claims, features, images of features of the product. They can all come into a conjoint study. So there are endless amount of use cases that can be applied to a conjoint. Okay, I'm just going to flick back to the presentation. Bear with me a second. And over to Shiva, please.
Great. Hey, thank you, Matt, for a great demo. So I really hope that the short demo that Matt gave you a good understanding of the capability of conjoint analysis and how you could use it to further your understanding of specific product-related issues and have a rapid set of actionable insights into your served markets that is truly customized to your needs. Here, we have summarized some of the learnings that are relevant to the development process that you will get from doing a conjoint analysis. For example, like we went through the product attribute, preferences and importance. This is, really key in, when it comes to decide, if, when you have limited resources, which features get the most, love and, attention. I mean, Matt presented like the pie chart with what features your customers are most looking for. There's how do you price the product for what segment? The filters that you saw on the simulator really provide you with the segmentation that you need to see, hey, what portion of the market most prefers the features I'm going to bring to market, or what features do I need to bring to the portion of the market that I have the greatest access to. And so you can do it from both ways and like figure it out. um, Again, I spoke about the segmentation capabilities that you get. Some of the pivot tables will tell you what the major segments that are most interested in what features are, as well as the like the willingness to pay for different customer segments for any new features that you have asked them about and you want to introduce. We looked at the wargaming scenarios. You can go ahead and try to anticipate your competitors' moves and understand what impact that could have on your share if you take some action or if you don't. And those really provide you with the basis for better decision making through the product development and launch process. So on the next slide, I'd like to talk to you real quick about some of the best practices that we have seen growth leaders employ. And these are pretty some things that you'd be fairly like familiar with, like regardless when you launch a study, right? So definitely when you launch a conjoint analysis, have a product or customer hypothesis so that you can you can test against it, and that forms the basis of your storyline throughout the survey. um, Definitely, have an understanding also of who you want to survey, and that's going to get you a good representative sample. And try to understand where they are, and how you look for them, what characteristics you expect them to have, and that should get you a representative sample. I cannot overemphasize the need to have the survey planning and design be done in a cross-functional manner, throughout your team, because then you have different aspects of the feature sets and development considerations taken into account when you ask questions from the customers, regarding their segmentation, and that's going to give you a lot of great insight into what features you develop and how you market those features to your customer set. And most of all, once you have this storyline, point number 6 will become like pretty easy in terms of not overcomplicating things and keeping it focused. But most of all, right, don't launch and pray that your product will be successful. Rely on a database tool set, and conjoint analysis done right and done at a good frequency is going to provide you with incredible data to let you take the right action for your markets. Uh, uh, Next slide. And so, in conclusion, again, I'm going to repeat one thing that was mentioned in an earlier slide. Like the two things you got to be clear about is, who are you targeting and what features or attributes are you going to ask them about. Once you have these two, fleshed out and agreed to, within the team, I think you are, quite ready to do a conjoint analysis, and you can leverage our agile process to take it to market. So in conclusion, I hope we have given you a good window into how conjoint analysis can help you with your product development and launch process. And feel free to reach out to me or Matt or on the Epic website if you'd like more information or a one-on-one demo. And we'll now open it up for questions.
Yes, thank you, Shiva. Thank you, Matt. Great presentation. And we have a very responsive audience today, which is really great. Thank you, everybody, for all the questions. They came through the chat. I've marked them as questions, so you can see them and find them on the dedicated kind of question section. On the right-hand side, Matt, Shiva, you can see this question mark. If you press it, then you can see the top questions as of now. I see we just got 2 new. Let me add them to this section, and then we can start answering them question after question. So the first question to you is, what is the average sample size considered for a survey?
Yeah, good question. It really depends on what you're targeting them with, as Shiva explained on one of the summary slides. Depends on the number of concepts or number of products you have in the test, the number of unique feature levels, but typically the range can be between 200 completed surveys up to 350 completed surveys. But in the survey design, when we enter or input the products or services to be tested, we have an algorithm that actually spits out what the minimum number of completed surveys is for to guarantee statistical significance. So that important question is addressed actually in the platform when designing the survey.
Yeah, I'd also like to add that from a B2B scenario, if you have like a smaller base, but that is willing to spend a little bit more time, you can even lower that number of respondents you need a bit more, but you give them more choice cards, so they have to click through, just take a slightly longer survey, and you have to incentivize them a little bit more, to answer the survey. So it could be even close to 150 to 100 if you can have them answer a longer survey.
Mm-hmm. Okay, great. Thank you, guys. The second question comes from Sandeep. I hope you can see them. I just spelled them out loud. So from a practice standpoint, did you get a chance to test if Bayesian conjoints performed any better than adaptive, choice-based, or any traditional frequentist methods?
So what we're finding is the majority of clients prefer to use a choice-based conjoint. The actual setup for an adaptive conjoint study is in the multiples in terms of can be in multiples in terms of complexity and indeed cost. They turn into projects, more kind of research projects, as opposed to what we do is when the business question arises, let's ask it and get the answers really, really quickly within a couple of days. So in terms of the accuracy, in terms of statistical significance of results, our understanding is pretty marginal in terms of the between the various conjoint methodologies. But definitely conjoint, from a trade-off precision compared to some of the earlier versions of conjoint analysis, which would have been rating or ranking based, the fact that choice-based conjoint analysis uses trade-off decision making, that most definitely ensures much more integrity and statistical significance in the results.
And maybe to clarify, so we are choosing a choice-based conjoint approach on the platform with a Bayesian kind of logistic regression model, which then helps us to, not only capture preferences, but we can also turn them into like powerful simulators. And here the Bayesian regression comes in. So we kind of have both on the platform.
And just to add to that, it's actually the algorithm is a hierarchical Bayesian algorithm. So we can, as I showed you in the respondent tab, we can actually calculate preference scores at an individual level as well. And facilitates that.
All right. So whenever we answer a question, I mark them as answered. So they kind of, you can see them in the answered section then. Let's talk about the next question raised from Apeka. The question is, can you talk a little bit more about how Conjoint can be used very early in the product development process? So you mentioned it can be used at multiple stages in a go-to-market process. So this one's focusing on like the very early stage, probably about the conceptualization of the product, the idea, etc.
Go ahead.
So yeah, so even early in the product development process, I'm going to talk about, and I'll try to answer two questions at once, because I think Kusum asked a question as well about what portions of the development process you want to target your conjoint analysis at. So I'll try and tackle both of these at once. Early in the process, between the idea stage and the concept stage, is a great section to to have your conjoint, because that helps you essentially understand the feature preferences in the market, and it helps you prioritize those features early on from a customer perspective. And what that does is it provides your development and your marketing and your product management team with a lot more direction and focus in terms of what they want to go investigate so they can develop it, right? So you always want to dig into the most wanted features first, right? Obviously, because that provides you with the most value. And oftentimes you have diluted focus among the teams, and that ends up in you having a much longer development cycle and a much more uncertain development cycle. So knowing early on what features to emphasize like your research on is going to be of great help to any development team. So I would definitely have that conjoint analysis done between the idea and the concept stage early on, in a huge value. And at a minimum, I would also definitely have conjoint analysis done between like the design phase ending and the launch phase, right? Because you now need to make sure that you have a deeper understanding of the market segments that are going to adopt the product, and a more updated understanding of what they're willing to pay, what the competitive scenario is in the market, and so how are you going to position the launch and so on from a product launch perspective. So both of those are a minimum. But what I would say is, if you have a longish development process, which many companies do, because they're trying to develop like challenging things. If you have situations where you have competitive moves in the market, or you have some new technologies being introduced, those are definitely points in time where you need to understand how your customer's perspective has changed, and bring that into the project, so you make sure that you're going in the right direction.
We've even actually seen it being increasingly adopted, and has been adopted in the startup community, because when you think about it, resources are very scarce. So in terms of kind of optimizing or making the most efficient use of those scarce resources, asking the questions early in the development cycle, what do the target customers really want, rather than going on and developing, and developing every feature that you think the customer wants. It has been used in that context, and we're seeing that more and more.
Mm-hmm. And I think in context again about the cost efficiency, I think here also again kind of the mission of Epic Conjoint is that we perform conjoints in the quality of market research agencies at a fraction of the price, also faster. So as Matt just said, you don't have to answer all questions in one, because since we offer it at a fraction of the price of maybe you're currently used to it, and as also Matt has experienced it during his Telefonica time, for example, this then allows our partners as well to do it more often, and kind of define for themselves also the ideal point maybe to actually do a conjoint analysis. So I think that answered both Apeka's and Kusum's questions. Thank you a lot. I marked them as answered here to get a good overview. The next one is from Mahi, and the question is, how can we examine whether users of existing products are willing to pay a recurring fee to access new features, and how do we determine the feature set for such an option?
Good question. And we see this as a use case, increasingly as use cases where, in fact, we testing for IoT type propositions where there's an upfront charge and a per month subscription fee. For some clients, we're actually identifying the optimal balance between the upfront and the monthly. So that can be done. There can be two price features within the same conjoint. So that's definitely a use case that's been conducted increasingly.
So that you would put both prices in, and then you can also see the trade-off decisions and the price elasticities in one kind of consideration set, and you could actually tell whether there's a preference or like a kind of difference in price elasticity, for example, for the upfront fee as to the recurring fee, and kind of find the right balance, if I understand it correctly, Matt.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Yeah. Okay, thank you, Mahi, for the question. I hope that answered it. And next question came from Ketan. And the question is, for B2B engagement, who do you direct conjoint analysis to? Engineers, buyers, or others? So the question is about the target audience kind of in B2B. And I've already dropped a quick message in the chat saying that it always depends on who is the decision maker in the hand, who does the buy or not buy decision, and what's the product. For us, we have multiple ways to distribute surveys. So we always say, like, where your customers are, we can also send our surveys to. And in B2B context, we usually try to get decision makers. And those decision makers, they can be in procurement, they can be engineers, they can be buyers if you can identify them. It's always very different. So was my quick answer, Matt Shiva. Any?
So that's a good question, Ketan. I think one of the things to keep in mind is it always helps to ask people who are key influencers in the process as well, because if they play if they're influencers, they play a role in the decision. While they may not be final decision makers, their influence makes a big difference. So understanding their preference is going to help you, not just from a feature preference perspective, but development perspective, but also from a marketing perspective, where you understand what portion of the people who play a role in influencing how the product is used, or if it is used, what you want to emphasize with them to encourage adoption of the product.
Yes, and of course we can, in addition to targeting or distributing service to your own customer base, if you want that competitive view of that market, that 360 competitive landscape view, we can engage, specialized B2B panel providers that can be utilized. We do that quite frequently to give that more holistic view.
Mm-hmm. And currently, like more and more, we also kind of mix it up. So let's say you want 400 survey completes, and we can actually maybe distribute some surveys through your own contact list as well as through a panel provider. We oftentimes have the chance to not only listen to the voice of your own customer, your own contact that already exists, but oftentimes those dedicated B2B panel providers can help us to get in touch with people that are decision makers in that industry. So you have kind of the other voice of customers as well, of potential customers or contacts, I should say. Okay, thank you, Keaton, for the question. The next question comes from Raj. He says, "Great tool. Can we also run this tool analysis on a portfolio of competing products for marketplace as well as internal products?"
Yes, of course. That's in fact the classic conjoint case study or use case would be, you have ideas for a new product. You want to see how it would resonate with that particular set of target customers. So in that context, you would bring in your existing product, you would bring in your competitors' products, and the new ideas into one conjoint. And that is a very common use case.
Mm. Okay, thank you, Raj, for the question. I hope that has answered your question. Then let's move to Deepankar's question. He says, "Interested in understanding the frequency of conjoint analysis suggested for an existing product and for a product in development." So the frequency, like what would you see as kind of an ideal frequency of conjoint analysis, either for an existing product or when you develop a new product?
Sure. For existing products, we have clients who have really kind of embraced conjoint analysis. The fact that we can do it much more quickly and cost effectively, or they can do it much more quickly and cost effectively. So they've started to introduce it more on a regular, more frequent basis to kind of keep tabs on the market. So, once a quarter, a particular segment, particular product. So yeah, even with existing products, it is a great way to keep tabs on the competitive landscape. So understand, what your competitors have done, and actually, it's also increasingly been used to understand a competitive threat. So your competitor launches a new product or comes out with an aggressive promotion. You can very quickly design that conjoint study, send it out to the target customers, and have the results back, and have it make an educated decision as to whether it really is a threat that needs to be addressed, or indeed it can be put on a watching brief. But increasing more often than not, the typical use case is new product launches. But it has, conjoint has so many more applicable use cases, even in that existing product context.
Mm.
Yeah, I think it's a great validation, for like your pricing as well. If you have an existing like product, to see if you are at the right point. If depending on your pricing frequency, depending on like Matt said, if a competitor launches something new, what the threat is to your business, and so on and so forth. So it can be even used to make a business case to make a change in the product. So it's a great tool for a product manager.
Mm-hmm. Okay, thank you, guys. Thank you, Deepankar, for the question.
Sorry, actually, just on that, very important use case is to understand price. The appetite for price increases, or the validity for price increases. And that's as you saw, we can capture the price sensitivity at a customer segment level, a customer level even. So that really will inform as to what who can you pass increases on to, and who you can't.
I think in general we could almost say, since this is like one important aspect of the presentation, that we say, no, that there's a specific picture of Epic Conjoint out there, which is, it's very expensive, very kind of tedious. And that's the main reason why it's not done so frequently. So that's part of our education process. Then oftentimes when we've done the first or the second project with our partners, that we say you can benefit from this multiple times. And then, of course, it always depends, as Shiva addressed, how long the go-to-market process is, how long is the product development process. So I think you can always define then certain breakpoints where it makes sense to turn towards the market again, get some customer feedback. But of course, it always depends on the client, I guess. And in the end, of course, to a certain degree, it's always also kind of a budget, or we'll not even say budget, maybe also kind of a priority question in the specific company. Thank you for the question. Let's move to Udai's question. Matt, you will love it, since segmentation is a big topic for us currently. The question is, can conjoint analysis be used to determine which segment to target?
Yeah, great question, and very topical. As Toby said, we are actually in the process of evaluating bringing automated segmentation to the results of the conjoint studies. So to really inject more a deeper level of rigor and insight into customers' preferences at a segment level. So the idea being, because it's automated based on the answers to the target customers or respondents, it'll generate very distinct segments, and of course then they can be used to benchmark against maybe your existing segmentation. Because sometimes it can differ between the overall company segmentation, and a product level segmentation. So yeah, this is something we're very excited about, and within the next couple of months, we hope to introduce to the platform.
So yeah, the answer is yes, Uday, to your question. And doing a conjoint analysis basically gives you all the data you need to get your segmentation from a needs-based perspective. And also, if you want to characterize your segment, you need to be asking questions to your respondents that helps you to characterize them in ways that can help you from a launch and marketing perspective. So your from a needs-based perspective, your segmentation will be as good as the features you asked about, and from a characterization perspective, it'll be as good as the segmentation level questions that you asked them about. Which is why one of the best practices is to take a cross-functional look at your process when you design your conjoint survey. So pull in a cross-functional team, ask them, what do you want to know about the customer, and make sure that those questions are asked to the customer in a simple way that they can answer quickly.
Mm-hmm. Okay, thank you. So that was the question about segmentation and conjoint analysis. Thank you, Uday. We will have one more question clarifying something that we showed during the presentation. But before that, I would like to close the poll that we've raised in the beginning. So I hope it goes well if I close the survey now. I hope I can see the results. This is the first time we are using Webinar Ninja, so forgive me if I now deleted all the results. And I think I did. Okay, I'm a pro.
Tease, you tease.
But I remember what. Oh no, now I see it again. Okay. So the question was, what do you see as the key opportunities to improve your company's product launch process? And the first option was targeting the right customer segments, received 0%. 0%. So it seems like, at least like from the people that have been voting, customer segments doesn't seem to be a big problem. The next one got 35% of all votes, and the question was prioritizing the most impactful features. So I think that's a classic use case of conjoint analysis, as we've learned. The next one with 6.7% of all answers, defining product tiers. Something that would be maybe interesting, at least maybe to one or two person here in the audience. 20% for the next answer option, which is understanding customer price elasticity. So that's a no-brainer. That's conjoint analysis. For the fifth one, we have 26% understanding customer value. What usually drives our all projects that we are doing. And the sixth last answering option was quantifying business case impact of. I can't see the rest of the sentence. Okay, quantifying business case impact of your decisions. I think Shiva.
Yeah,
and it's been 13%. So the two most important use cases that we've seen here is determine most impactful features and understanding customer value as well as price elasticity. And I think that's what Epic Conjoint could help with.
Just to say, conjoint analysis there's no better research methodology for understanding price, for calculating price elasticity and making inferences than for price sensitivity at a segment level, even as you saw at a customer level.
So let's make sure to include that in the deck of slides that goes out to the audience that attended.
Shiva, I understand that as a message to me. So before I delete it again, I do a screenshot. Thank you. And then there was one more question regarding something we showed on the slide. Matt, if you would like to jump back to the presentation.
Sure.
I think it was in the very beginning. So the question was, what is concept 5? It was alluded in one of the earlier slides showing the pricing graph. Shiva, that was something that you've showed. I wanted some clarification. I think it was just an example, a screenshot.
Just an example. So if you remember from the demo and the simulation, you can go and optimize on whatever concept you want.
Yeah.
So it was just an example of one of the studies we've done where we optimized for a certain concept. So for example, in this demo, if we can optimize to an iPhone or to a Samsung or whatever, and it'll tell you what price point is going to be optimal for that particular concept. And if you change the concept, then it'll change the price point to show you the optimal price point based on the feedback that has been received from the 300 people customer base that's been polled. And all these optimal price points are going to be statistically significant.
Yep.
So that's what Matt is currently showing is kind of the graph we did a screenshot from just on the platform. And I think, it showed the volume share, the revenue curve. Exactly. So the concept we are referring to was one of the simulated concepts that we've put into the price optimizer.
Okay,
great. I think we addressed all the questions. Thank you so much. It's way more fun if we have such a responsive audience with many questions asked. Thank you. Before Matt and Shiva have the final words, thank you again. We love to hear from you. Reach out to us after the webinar. Maybe if you like what you see, you can just discuss with us your next product launch. Maybe we can do a pilot survey. And if so, keep in mind that I've shared a 25% discount code today. Just mention it when you reach out to it, and you will get 25% on the first pilot. Thank you so much from my side. Over to Matt and Shiva.
Thanks, Toby. Great hosting. So yeah, just echo what Toby said. Well, first of all, thank you very much for your attention. That's gone an hour and a half nearly at this stage. So really appreciate that. Great questions, and yes, I'm sure you've plenty of burning questions that now I hope you can see can be answered quickly, cost effectively, and concisely with the conjoint study, a rapid conjoint survey. So by all means, if you want to explore those burning questions, please get in contact.
Yeah, I echo what both Matt and Toby said. Thank you, Toby, for hosting, and thank you everyone for your attention and participating. Do be in touch.
Yeah, great. And you will all receive an email with the recording of this webinar and some information about the presentation. So thank you. Have a great day in the US and a great evening in Europe. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Take care.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Okay. Bye.